If you had told me in 2022 that my $145,000 nest egg would buy me a steel bench at Suvarnabhumi Airport and exactly $42 in my pocket, I would have called you crazy. I wasn't a gambler. I didn't do drugs. I wasn't hanging out in the red light districts throwing cash at strangers. I was a 58-year-old heavy equipment mechanic from Cleveland, Ohio. A guy who spent 30 years waking up at 5 in the morning to fix frozen diesel engines in the dead of winter. I just wanted to retire in peace. I wanted to stop hurting every time I stood up. 2 years later, I was sitting in an air-conditioned office in Bangkok, begging a consulate officer for a repatriation loan just so I could fly back and sleep in my younger brother's spare room in Akron. $145,000. Gone. Not in a stock market crash. Not in some complex crypto scam. It vanished in exactly 24 months, day by day, decision by decision. While I thought I was being the smartest guy in the room, I thought my blue-collar street smarts made me bulletproof. I thought because I knew how to rebuild a transmission and spot a liar in a garage, I knew exactly how the world worked. But when you're 8,000 miles from home, the rules you lived by your whole life don't mean a damn thing. Your common sense won't protect you when you're playing a game where you don't even know you're on the board. I lost a lifetime of savings, my pride, and the only retirement I was ever going to get. And I did it by making choices that, at the time, made perfect logical sense to me. The math always seemed right until there was nothing left to count. To understand how a grown man who worked with his hands his whole life ends up practically homeless in a foreign airport with $42 to his name, you have to understand where I started. Because this didn't begin with a mistake. It began with a plan that looked absolutely bulletproof. For 30 years, I worked as a heavy equipment mechanic and maintenance supervisor right outside Cleveland. You don't survive 3 decades under loaders and excavators by being careless. You survive by looking at a machine, finding the weak point, and fixing it before it snaps. That was my whole life. Tangible facts, nuts and bolts. If something was broken, I could put my hands on it and make it right. I managed crews, handled budgets, and I never went over budget. I lived my life by the blueprint. But you can't put a wrench to your own life. 3 years ago, my 22-year marriage ended. It wasn't explosive. Nobody threw plates. It just ground down to metal on metal until it stopped. When the dust settled, my ex-wife kept the better half of the assets, and my 2 adult kids had their own lives to worry about. I was 58 years old, living alone, waking up at 5 in the morning to go freeze my hands off on diesel engine blocks in the Ohio winter. My back was shot, my knees were gone, and honestly, I just felt invisible. You hit a certain age as a divorced guy in the Midwest, and you just fade into the drywall. Nobody sees you. Nobody needs you. You are just another guy in a Carhartt jacket standing in line at the hardware store. Then came a Tuesday night in February. I was sitting in my recliner, nursing a bad back and a cold beer, scrolling through YouTube. I stumbled onto a video of an American expat living in Thailand. A guy sitting on a condo balcony, eating fresh seafood, breaking down his monthly costs. $1,200 a month for everything. I sat up and looked at my own numbers. I had exactly $145,000 sitting in a Chase checking account. That was it. The sum total of my life after selling my modest house and cashing out a chunk of my 401k. Every dollar in that account represented a morning I got up before the sun. A weekend I worked instead of rested. A winter where I crawled under machinery in temperatures that made my joints feel like grinding gravel. I had a pension coming, $1,800 a month guaranteed, but it wouldn't kick in until I turned 62. I had a 4-year gap to bridge. I ran the numbers on a legal pad right there on my coffee table. If I moved to Thailand and lived on $2,000 a month, I would only burn through 96 grand by the time my pension started. I would still have a $50,000 cushion, and then my steady monthly income would cover my living expenses forever. The math made perfect sense. It was a conservative, solid plan. I wasn't chasing a dream. I was engineering a solution. I didn't rush. I got my paperwork straight and secured a non-immigrant retirement visa. I packed up, flew out, and rented a sensible condo in the on-nut neighborhood of Bangkok for exactly $400 a month. I didn't go near the notorious party zones. I wasn't there to act like a 20-year-old on spring break. I was there to stretch my dollar and rest my bones. And for the first 3 months, it worked exactly the way I drew it up. I was coming in under budget. I was losing weight because I was walking everywhere and eating fresh food. For the first time in years, I felt respected. People smiled at me. I wasn't just a tired mechanic anymore. I was a guy with his life together. That's when I met Ploy. Not in a bar, in a mid-range coffee shop where she worked as a manager. She was 42 years old, wore a uniform, worked long shifts, and spoke decent English. When we went out for dinner, she didn't ask me for money. She was responsible. She seemed like a hard-working woman who just wanted a quiet, stable life, exactly like I did. I thought I had found a genuine partner to share my early retirement with. I thought my blue-collar street smarts had paid off, filtering out the bad deals and finding the real thing. My Chase account was sitting at a comfortable $139,000. My rent was cheap, my back stopped hurting, and I had a woman who actually seemed to care if I woke up in the morning. Everything was going according to the blueprint. But that's the thing about blueprints in a culture you don't understand. You think you're pouring a solid concrete foundation, but you're really just digging your own financial grave. About 6 months in, Ploy brought up a change of scenery over dinner. Bangkok is a great city, but the smog gets thick and the traffic is a constant grinding idle. She suggested we move north to her home province of Udon Thani in the Isan region. She painted a picture that hit every bullet point on my retirement checklist. Clean air, quiet dirt roads, a massive drop in the cost of living. She had family up there who could help us navigate the local systems. I did the math right there at the table. If I was spending $400 a month on rent in the city, I could easily cut that in half out in the country. A cheaper lifestyle meant my runway would stretch even further. This wasn't a reckless jump. It was a calculated relocation to maximize my savings until my pension kicked in. I told her to pack her bags. That was the first domino. You don't hear them fall when the math makes sense. Once we got up to Udon Thani, the reality of rural Thailand set in fast. You can't walk out of a high-rise and catch the SkyTrain. The distances between the village, the markets, and the hospital are long, and if you don't have a vehicle, you are effectively stranded. We needed a truck. Not a luxury car, a reliable tool to haul groceries and run errands. I'm a heavy equipment mechanic. I know what to look for under a hood. We found a used Toyota Hilux, clean engine, tight belts, straight frame. The price was $22,000. I had the cash. This is where the local rules start bending your American common sense until it breaks. A foreigner can legally buy a vehicle in Thailand, but the paperwork, residence certificates, translation fees, the trips to immigration, it feels like the system is actively trying to grind you down. We were standing in the dealership lot, sweating in the afternoon sun, when Ploy said we should just put it in her name. She had her Thai ID card. 10 minutes instead of 3 weeks. I stood there and ran the logic. I had been married for 22 years. I knew how a partnership worked. When you're building a life with a woman, you don't treat her like a hostile witness. You act like a team. My blue-collar street smarts told me I was being efficient. I pulled the 22 grand from my account. I handed over the cash. The dealer handed her the keys. And just like that, $22,000 was sitting in a driveway I didn't own. I didn't sweat it. I was focused on the next phase of the blueprint. But the truck was just the first loose bolt. 4 months went by. We were 10 months into this new life. Renting cheap upcountry was fine, but Ploy made a logical point over coffee one morning. Her family owned a plot of land just outside the village. Good, flat, dry dirt. Why were we throwing rent money away every month when we could build our own house? I sat down with my legal pad, just like back in Cleveland. A custom concrete home, built from the ground up, exactly to my specifications. Heavy-duty air conditioning, solid roof, Western-style kitchen, wraparound porch. The local builder quoted us $45,000. Back in Ohio, 45 grand barely buys you an empty lot in a neighborhood you wouldn't walk through at night. Here, it bought me a brand new house. I would never pay rent again. My monthly overhead would drop to nothing but groceries and electricity. But there is a hard, unbreakable rule in Thailand. Foreigners cannot own land. Period. You can own the bricks, but not the dirt underneath them. Because the house was going on her family's property, the deed would remain firmly in her name. I knew this. I wasn't blind. But I rationalized it with the arrogance of a guy who thinks his mechanical logic applies to everything. I was 58 years old. I wasn't going anywhere. This was my forever home. The return on investment wasn't about real estate appreciation. It was about locking down a permanent rent-free base. Like buying a high-end air compressor for the shop. You pay the heavy cost up front so you never have to rent the tool again. I transferred the $45,000. I stood in the dirt and watched the foundation get poured. I watched the cinder blocks go up, row by row. Then I checked the Chase app on my phone. Between the living expenses, the $22,000 truck, and the $45,000 house, my balance had dropped from $145,000 to exactly $78,000. I had burned through almost half my life savings in less than a year. But I looked at the fresh paint and the solid walls and told myself I had a hard asset. I had a home. I didn't realize that if you can't put your name on the deed, you aren't buying a house. You are buying a very expensive gift. And once you prove you can afford a house, the local economy decides you can afford a whole lot more. Living in a nice, newly built concrete house in a rural Isayan village changes how people see you. You stop being the retired American neighbor. You become the local branch of the Federal Reserve. It started small. A water buffalo got sick. Out there, a buffalo isn't a pet. It's agricultural equipment. If it dies, the family loses income. They needed a vet and medicine. A few $100. I paid it without blinking. I was a good guy, trying to fit in with the in-laws. Then the real hit started. Ploy's father collapsed in the yard. Emergency gallbladder surgery. The public hospital had a massive wait list. A man in his late 60s lying in agony on a crowded, unair-conditioned ward for days before a surgeon would look at him. If they went to the private hospital in the city, they could operate the next morning. The cost was $5,500. I hesitated. I'm not proud of it. That was a serious chunk of my remaining runway. But Ploy was sitting at the kitchen table, sobbing into her hands. It was her father. How do you look at a woman you're sharing a life with and tell her you won't save her dad when you have the exact amount sitting in a checking account? You don't. You step up. I paid the $5,500. 2 weeks later, before the surgical incisions had even healed, her brother came knocking on our new porch. He had a brilliant idea to start a local delivery business. He just needed a loan for a commercial motorcycle and some cargo gear. $4,000. I pushed back hard. I told Ploy I was not an ATM. My funds were finite, the well was going dry, and I was not financing a startup for a guy I barely knew. The sweet, responsible coffee shop manager vanished right in front of my eyes. Her face went hard. The tears started, but it wasn't sadness. It was weaponized anger. She accused me of not understanding Thai family values. She told me that in her culture, family takes care of family, and if I loved her, I would help her brother. "You have the money," she said, staring right through me. "Why are you letting us suffer?" I hated the guilt trip. I hated the manipulation. But the silence in that house over the next 3 days was deafening. I was a guy who just wanted peace. I wanted my quiet retirement back. I transferred the $4,000 to her brother, telling myself it was a one-time loan. I thought paying the toll would fix the road, but it only proved the wallet was open for business, and the requests were never going to stop. The bleeding wasn't stopping, and the math was going aggressively in the wrong direction. Ploy sensed me locking down. She came to me a few weeks later with what sounded like a permanent, logical solution. She said we needed income. We couldn't just sit there draining my savings every time a bill came up. She proposed opening a small roadside restaurant and convenience store right there in the village, on another piece of family land. It appealed straight to my mechanical brain. Tangible goods, inventory, daily cash flow. If we built a shop, Ploy would have a job to manage, we would have incoming revenue, and it would build a wall around the rest of my savings until my pension kicked in. It felt like a smart defensive move. The cost to build the shop structure, buy the commercial refrigerators, stock the shelves, and get the local permits was $25,000. I funded it. But just like the land and the truck, the local laws boxed me out entirely. As a foreigner on a retirement visa, I couldn't legally work in the shop. I couldn't ring up a customer. I couldn't sweep the floors. And the business registration had to be entirely in her name. We opened the doors. It was month 20 of my grand bulletproof retirement plan. I sat at the kitchen table and logged into my Chase account. The balance staring back at me was $12,000. I started with $145,000. I had $12,000 left. I had a truck I didn't own. I had a house I didn't own. I had a restaurant I didn't own. I built the lifeboat exactly to spec, but I wasn't allowed to steer it, and the ship was already taking on water. The restaurant wasn't making money. It was hemorrhaging cash from day one. I quickly realized that half the village was buying goods on credit they had no intention of repaying. Her family members were walking in, grabbing cases of beer, bags of rice, and cooking oil, and walking out the door without touching the register. When I raised it with Ploy, she told me I didn't understand how the community worked, that you had to build trust before you built profit, that this was how business operated in a village. My remaining $12,000 was the only thing keeping the lights on and the shelves stocked. I was subsidizing the entire neighborhood's groceries and beer with the last of my retirement savings. And the woman running it was disappearing. Ploy wasn't around much anymore. She stayed in town overnight, claiming she was running errands or negotiating with suppliers. The excuses were always just plausible enough that I couldn't call them lies directly. The family members who used to greet me with huge smiles and plates of fresh food when the loans were flowing now walked past me in the yard like I was a ghost. I had outlived my usefulness. The account was too low to be interesting, and I could feel it in every interaction, every cold nod, every conversation that stopped when I walked into the room. A man knows when he has been written off, and I had been written off. I finally woke up. The street smarts I thought I always had finally kicked in, about 20 months and $130,000 too late. I sat alone at the kitchen table in the house I had paid $45,000 to build and stared at the number on my screen. $12,000. If I didn't stop right now, I wouldn't make it to 62. I would be working my broken body to the bone in a Thai rice field just to eat. I thought about what 62 felt like from where I was sitting, and I thought about those early mornings in Cleveland. Every one of them. Every frozen morning I climbed into that truck and drove to a job site so I could have this money one day. I had handed it all away, piece by piece, to a blueprint that was never mine. I waited for Ploy to come home. I turned the laptop around so the screen faced her. I told her the bank account was closed. No more inventory for the restaurant. No more loans for the brother. No more medical bills for anyone. The vault was locked. She didn't cry. She didn't negotiate. She looked at the 12 grand on the screen, then looked back at me with a face so completely blank it was more frightening than anger would have been. She pointed at the front door. "Get out," she said. I stood up slowly. I pointed at the tile floor, the concrete walls that surrounded us. "This is my house. I paid $45,000 for every brick in this place. I watched the foundation get poured. I was standing right here in this dirt." She crossed her arms. She didn't even blink. "Show me your name on the paper." There was nothing left to say. She knew the answer. I knew the answer. The police officer I was about to go talk to knew the answer too. I turned around and walked outside to grab the truck keys off the hook by the door. I was going to pack my tools, take the Hilux, and drive until I figured out what came next. I reached into my pocket. Nothing. I looked at the driveway. It was empty. Her brother had taken the Toyota Hilux to town. Of course he had. I walked 2 miles down the dusty dirt road to the local police station. I'm a blue-collar American. Where I come from, if someone takes your house and your truck, you get the law involved. I sat across a metal desk from an officer and laid out the entire timeline in the clearest terms I could manage. The $45,000 house, the $22,000 truck, the $25,000 business. I pulled up the bank statements on my phone and laid every transfer in front of him. Dates, amounts, account numbers. I had paid for every nail and cinder block. I had the receipts to prove it. The officer listened patiently. He looked at my phone screen. He nodded slowly the whole time, the way a doctor nods when he already knows what the X-ray is going to say. Then he leaned forward and spoke in broken but precise English. He reminded me that the land deed was legally registered to her family. The vehicle registration was legally printed with her name. The business license was her property. He looked me dead in the eye and told me that I was a guest in his country. I had absolutely no legal rights to any of it. It wasn't a crime. It was a civil matter. Her documents were bulletproof. He pushed my phone back across the metal desk. There was nothing unkind in his expression. He wasn't gloating. He was just reading me the law, and the law said I had nothing. The reality hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I wasn't building a life. I was being systematically dismantled. Every logical decision I made was just another step into a trap I had happily financed, one spreadsheet calculation at a time. Within 3 weeks, the environment in the village became so hostile I couldn't sleep with both eyes closed. I packed everything I actually owned into a single suitcase. I caught a cheap, non-air-conditioned bus back to Bangkok, sitting in the heat with my one bag and trying to run the numbers one more time in my head, looking for anything I had missed. There was nothing. I paid for a few nights in a rundown hostel with peeling paint and made a desperate trip to the U.S. Embassy. I stood at the thick glass window and asked what an American citizen could do when he had been taken for everything he had. They handed me a printed list of local lawyers I couldn't afford and told me to have a nice day. I called my younger brother in Akron. I asked him to put a one-way flight on his credit card. By month 24, my grand retirement plan was completely over. I was sitting on a cold steel bench at Suvarnabhumi Airport, waiting for a flight my brother charged to save me, with exactly $42 in my pocket. $42 was all that was left of 30 years of 5 o'clock mornings and frozen hands and overtime shifts I worked while other guys went home to their families. So here I am, recording this from a dimly lit spare bedroom in my younger brother's house in Akron, Ohio. I'm 60 years old now. My back aches worse than it ever did under the hood of a diesel truck back in Cleveland. Instead of waking up to the quiet morning air of the Thai countryside, I'm pulling part-time shifts behind the counter of a local auto parts store, scraping together enough cash to eat while I count the days until I turn 62 and that $1,800 pension finally kicks in. I lost the money. I lost my pride. I lost the only shot at a peaceful retirement I was ever going to get. I'm not looking for sympathy, and I'm not trying to make myself out to be a victim. I made the choices, and I handed over the cash, every single time. But I'm making this video because I know exactly how many guys are sitting in a recliner right now, running the exact same math I did on a legal pad, thinking their blue-collar street smarts make them bulletproof. If you're packing your bags, or even just daydreaming about stretching your dollar overseas, you need to write these 3 rules down, not as suggestions, as absolute survival tactics. Rule number 1, never, under any circumstances, buy an illiquid asset in a country where you don't have equal legal rights. It doesn't matter how much you trust the person. It doesn't matter how much sense the math makes on paper. If you cannot legally put your own name on the deed, you are not buying a house. You are not buying a truck. You are buying a very expensive gift, and when the relationship ends, the gift stays behind. Rule number 2, treat your retirement savings like a radiation leak. Keep it contained, keep it sealed, and never tell a single person your exact number. Not your partner, not her family, not your expat buddies at the coffee shop. The moment people know your ceiling, they will find emergencies to reach it. A sick water buffalo, a sudden $5,500 hospital bill, a $4,000 business loan for a brother you barely know. The crises will magically match whatever amount you have sitting in your checking account. Keep your mouth shut and your accounts locked. Rule number 3, separate romance from finance with a titanium wall. I was tired of being invisible. I wanted a partner, and I thought I had found one. But if a relationship requires constant injections of capital just to survive, it is not a relationship. It is a payroll. And the second the payroll stops, you will find out exactly what your presence was actually worth. If you're sitting in your living room right now, looking at your bank account and dreaming of a cheap paradise, hear me loud and clear. Your money can buy you a plane ticket, but it cannot buy you common sense in a culture you don't understand. Protect your nest egg like your life depends on it, because when you're 8,000 miles from home, it absolutely does. If you're planning a move overseas, do not pack a single bag until you've watched my next video on the 3 legal documents you must have before stepping foot in Southeast Asia. Click the link on the screen, subscribe to the channel, and let my $145,000 mistake be the tuition you never have to pay.